start with actually one of those albums that was on the top 1001 albums you had to listen to before you die, and I believe was not on the Rolling Stone chart. Matt, we'll go to you in a second, but it's the METERS-REJUVENATION.
Yes, that's correct. We do have numbers from Best Ever Albums, because this is actually, even though we covered the Meters in an earlier cold listen, Looka Py Py, that was their third highest ranked album on Best Ever Albums, but tonight we're covering Rejuvenation, which is their highest ranked album on Best Ever Albums, number 633 in the 1970s, 56 in 1974, and 3,503 of all time. John, I am curious, before I start my take and we start the clock, I'm curious as to, of all the why you chose this album to cover as part of the 1001 albums.
Because I wanted to give the Meters a second listen because of their influence in the R&B genre. I just know of how much they influenced that, and also the presence within the band of some pretty well-known names, you know, in the New Orleans sound and stuff like that. So I decided to go to them a second time. I felt like it would be a good thing. So we'll see if you guys agree with me or not. And Matt, I believe you are the one who starts this segment. So I'm going to put up the 15 minutes loosely, and I'm going to allow you to fire away with your hot take. What do you think, Matt?
So I first want to thank you, John, for putting this on the list, because this album's awesome. And it's definitely, and I went back and I listened to our segment that we did on Looka Py Py.
Seems a long time ago.
It was back when we were still in the 60s. I forgot about that. So the number one, the biggest difference here is you have vocals now. We've got words. We've got more traditional song structures. You know, the Looka Py Py was pretty much all instrumental, and it was good. But I think that we were we liked it. We didn't love it. This goes into the love category for me. This was a fantastic record. They got the funk grooves back, the drumming that we talked a lot about the last time. That was one of the things that I think that John and I in particular were really effusive about. You know, you have that back here again, the really great drumming part, like the offbeat drumming. It's very interesting. Great bass lines, great, you know, the guitar. I could hear the guitar here more. So I don't know if they recruited a vocalist here, or if this is just one of the other artists, one of the main four guys in the band that took the vocals. But it made it much more of an interesting listen for me. It just added a lot more depth, I think, overall to the songs. And they had some great background vocals as well. It wasn't just the vocals that were up front. But yeah, you got that mix of funk, soul, jazz, R&B, rock and roll. There's a jam band kind of song on here. That long, what is it? Loving. It ain't no use. Yeah. That was kind of like that was. I like that stuff. I'm interested to hear your guys' take on that, because that was by far the longest track, and it does veer into that jam band kind of area. And I'm sure that somebody like the Grateful Dead or Phish or jam bands would this is one of the ways that the Meters would influence them, certainly in the funk area. So the only song that I think kind of stood out for me was "Loving You Is on My Mind." That seemed like a little bit of a curveball. The penultimate track, it sounds a little bit more modern. They're kind of dropping the funk there. It was borderline Muzak. I mean, this is a more easy listening type music. So, it was a little bit out of place. It was a little generic. The tone, like a little bit of a generic tone. It's still not bad. I still wasn't like totally, taken aback by that. But it was just, it seemed a little oddly placed here. But other than that, the rest of this album was great. Love Is For Me was more of a slower tune, kind of a little bit more like Aretha Franklin. But Just Kiss My Baby starts with almost like a Hendrix guitar line, like that, like the like almost like that Voodoo Child guitar, wah-wah guitar sound. I could listen to that song for a while.
I just kiss my baby.
Yeah, they're great, and the singing's great, and the musician's great again. I really like this album. Big thumbs up from me.
Awesome. Josh, do you pile on or go in a different direction?
No, it was a big improvement for me too. I enjoyed listening to it also. I was trying to recall what my thoughts were on that first album, and I think Matt was right. I was kind of mediocre to unimpressed on it. And
I think we were all kind of in that line. I think we liked it, but I think it was a little sameness was a word that came up a lot.
They really I guess adapted to what was going on in the scene at this time compared to that other album we talked about. They really brought the funk on this album, and that was what I responded to right from the get-go. People say the opening track, almost every song has like an interesting hook, and a repetition is a big theme on this episode for me, I think, and this is repetition in a good way. You get the kind of one line stuck in your head per song, and it repeats over, and it's all about the groove on this. And I can imagine hearing this band play in New Orleans in a club and like dancing. You could dance to this whole album almost, just with the strength of the bass lines and the drumming and the vocalists. I had forgotten how little vocals there were in that other album, but it just
there were none, by the way.
Yeah.
None
Yeah.
at all.
There was like one
instrumental.
callback for Looka Py Py, you know.
Yeah.
It was like, but that wasn't really vocal.
And that's another big improvement. It's a strength of this band that they can just kind of insert that in and have it work seamlessly. I think one of my favorite songs, probably People Say, Hey Pac Away. Those are probably my two favorites. To answer Matt's question, love Ain't No Use. I liked about half of it, and then I was kind of getting tired of it at the end. But
I could see that.
But I think they kind of change directions mid-song in that too. So maybe that's they kind of do something different and change.
Well, with a lot of like jam
sound of
songs,
it.
they kind of start off in a more traditional song, and then they find a groove, and then they just take it for like 6 minutes or whatever, and it just becomes this big instrumental jam.
But yeah, great album all around, enjoyable listen, and definitely one to groove to.
Gotcha. Well, I'm going to add a third here because I really like this album quite a bit. It's very clearly.
How can you not? It's like,
well, it's just the first thing I mentioned this before is there's the Meters bassist is really well known within the bass community. Actually, this led me kind of down between this and Paul McCartney when we were talking about him last episode. It kind of put me down the rabbit hole in terms of like my favorite bassists or the most well-known bassists. So it's like, you've got like James Jamerson, right, and Larry Graham, who we talked about. James Jamerson was basically the bassist for Motown, like on all the great bass lines on Motown. I think Papa Was a Rolling Stone is the one that comes to mind like immediately that he's on. And Larry Graham we talked about, who was in Sly and the Family Stone, and then of course you got the rock bassists, right? You've got the traditional ones like Entwistle and John Paul Jones and Jack Bruce, right? And and then you have later ones like Sting comes to mind for me, always Geddy Lee and stuff. But yeah, George Porter Jr. is in that pantheon for me because his bass lines are just sticky throughout this entire album, aren't they? And the hilariously named Zigaboo Modaliste on drums. They're both, by the way, still in the Meters right now, which is awesome. As is Leo Nacantelli on guitar and background vocals. And of course, in this time, when we're listening to the two of the Nevilles are in there too. Art Neville and Cyril Neville are in the group at this point too. So it was a 5-piece, I think, for Looka Py Py, if I remember correctly. I think it is the same 5-piece for this album.
Well, I'm looking this up right now. It's actually a 4-piece, it looks like.
Okay, gotcha.
There's one guy that gets credit for a slide guitar and Just Kissed My Baby. So, and I only see one Neville, Art Neville. I don't see the other Neville on here.
Cyril?
Not on Wikipedia.
Okay. Gotcha.
And the vocals, actually, while I have it up, it actually is Ziggy Modaliste, the drummer, and Art Neville. They're the main vocalists, and then the other two do background vocals.
Well, you can hear Art Neville's voice on this because it sounds like the Neville brothers. Like we heard the Neville brothers before. It's like I could recognize it pretty much immediately, that sound. But yeah, this was a good vibes album. There really were no bad songs on this album. The other thing, too, is that it flew by. By the time I put it on and by the time it ended, it was kind of hard to believe that it was 44 minutes long. To me, this fit the time period way more than Looka Py Py did 1969. Yeah. I just felt that it was firmly an album that you would have picked up in 1974, whereas Looka Py Py felt like it was... I wouldn't say doesn't feel like it should have been from 1969, but I think what was always weird about that was it seemed like very much a subgenre what they were doing compared to like what was going on in the mainstream, whereas this felt very much in the mainstream. They were just as tight though, as they were in that album, because I think none of us really complained about the tightness of the group. It was more, we were just looking for a hook in. The variety here was all over the place. I think that the album started with People Say, which was a great, I mean, it immediately hooked me. Just Kiss My Baby is probably my favorite song on this album. It's infectious. It also has that thing where it's got a lot of repetition, like almost call and response-y repetition, but not in a way that drives you nuts. And that's a fine line sometimes, because the repetition can kind of, wear you down after a while. A deep cut for me that I really liked on this was Jungle Man. I really like that track. Its placement was perfect too. It almost introduced the second part of the album, I felt. But It Ain't No Use for a 12-minute song did exactly what I want a long song to do. It's one long song on an album, which always is fine with me if you put one on there. And it did enough things where it was creative and complicated enough that it justified the 11 minutes and 51 seconds. It was almost like, in a concert, right? When they want to give the vocalist a little bit of a break, so they play. I felt like that was on this album the same equivalent there. But strong recommendation for me. I really like this. Is a stealth horse too in terms of while it's not at the tippy top of my favorite albums of the 70s we've done so far, it's gonna be higher up, I think, at the end than when I'm doing this. We get to the end of the 70s and I'm looking at my ratings. I'll be surprised when Distance goes on, but then the second I put the album on, I'll remember exactly why I liked it. So it's a strong recommend for me, guys.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't listened to enough funk, despite all the albums we listened to. So I'm glad this was inserted. I mean, I know it's early
let's do a run.
In the decade too. So
we've done. We've done Isaac Hayes, which we universally loved.
Parliament.
We've done Parliament one time, Maggot Brain. We've done Sly and the Family Stone twice, who have funk elements. And that's pretty much it, right?
Right.
We did the Shaft sound. That was the
Curtis Mayfield too. Yeah. Curtis Mayfield has a fair, and we did two of his. Superfly certainly does, and Curtis has elements of it too. So we've had I wouldn't say we've ignored it or neglected it, but certainly
I guess I just need more. That's what I'm saying.
Josh needs more of that funk.
Well, you're basically laying the foundation, by the way, for like later on when we're doing 90s hip hop, right?
Yeah.
It's good, especially early 90s hip hop. I mean, my God, we're going to be hearing these sound, and not just early 90s, like the Beastie Boys too, are just pilfering this left and right.
Well, and that's what I think, because I did go back and I read the blurb in Rolling Stone about Looka Py Py, and it mentioned how a lot of stuff that from that record did end up being sampled later on by other artists. So I also wonder if that's one of the reasons that charted high when the Rolling Stones list is because of the influence or because what people used it for later on.
Well, yeah, if you're just going by album, it's hard to believe this one wouldn't come above Looka Py Py. But yeah, I think maybe it was that it also pushed that New Orleans sound into the mainstream, maybe. Yeah.
And I mean, it comes up higher than on Best Ever Albums, just not Rolling Stone. I'd also like to shout out on It Ain't No Use. I forgot about this. There's a great piano solo, because I think maybe in the original album, maybe Looka Py Py, I think we were talking a lot about the organ, and I was hearing a more varied keyboard arrangement here, so it wasn't all just electric keyboard or whatever. There was like basic piano. So I still only listened to Looka Py Py once, so I'm not sure if that holds true, if it is mostly organ, if there's a little bit more variety there. The other thing I'll say about the keys, and John, on Africa, was I hearing the Tonto synth a la Stevie Wonder? Because
you were hearing the Tonto
Stevie
synth.
Wonder thing. Okay, there you go.
Because there was 73 that we were talking about, the last Stevie Wonder album, right? And then this one, Intervisions, for those who are looking for our reference, and then that bled into 74 in terms of release date. And this is 74. So the Tonto synth. I told you it would become omnipresent in 70s R&B, and here you go. We're starting to hit 70s R&B after that. In fact, this will be the only album that we cover tonight that's after that Intervisions album. So it will be an interesting before and after as we do that. Okay. But good ear, Matt. You got it. It's got a distinct sound, doesn't it?
And I only caught it at the very end, so I don't know if I would listen to it. But I was just like, Stevie Wonder. I was like, oh, that synth, that Tonto synth thing that John says. So I wrote that down. But I can't remember if it's on other tracks as well. But this is one of those albums. I'm like, if you don't like this, I mean, check your pulse. It's just that this is one of those. I don't know. To me, this is one of those albums that I think just about anybody that has any background or enjoyment of any type of R&B, rock and roll, jazz. I mean, there's a lot of fusion of a lot of things here, but it just works so well, and it's just very catchy and very, very easy listen, and a lot of fun too. So big thumbs up.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think that'll bring us to the end of that segment.